I thought I had time. Everyone does. That's not a defense, it's just context. The illusion of available time is so persistent and so universal that I've stopped being surprised when I find it operating in my own decisions. I am still surprised by the specific way it manifested in this story, because the signs that time was shorter than I thought were clear enough that I should have read them. I didn't read them. And by the time I read them, the time I'd thought I had was gone. This is a story about a creative project that I never started. I had been carrying the idea for 11 years. A memoir, not in the formal, professional sense, not necessarily intended for publication. A document of a period of my life that had shaped me in ways I wanted to understand through the act of writing about them. I'd been meaning to start it for most of my adult life. It existed in my mind as a future project, something I would do when the conditions were right, when I had more time, more clarity, more distance from the events, more certainty about what I wanted to say. The conditions were never right. They kept not being right. Every year there was a reason they weren't right yet. And every year the project remained a future project, and I moved the horizon forward, and the horizon kept moving. What I didn't know, and what I should perhaps have been more willing to examine, was this: the conditions don't become right. That's not how creative work operates. Creative work begins in imperfect conditions. It makes the conditions better by existing. You don't wait until you have the time, you make the time because the thing requires it. You don't wait until you have the clarity, you find the clarity by writing through the confusion. I was waiting for something that was never going to arrive on its own. And the waiting had a cost that I didn't understand until I understood it too late. I had a health scare at 42. It was not as serious as it initially appeared, the outcome was good, and I am well now. But the weeks between the discovery and the resolution had a particular quality that I want to try to describe. They were the weeks in which I understood, at a level that bypassed abstraction and landed in my body, that time was genuinely finite. Not as information I'd always had but never felt. As a felt reality. And in the middle of those weeks, I thought about the memoir. About the 11 years I'd been waiting for the right conditions. About the clarity I'd been saving it for. About all the versions of the thing that had existed in my mind and that I'd chosen not to actualize because the time wasn't right. The time was never going to be right. I started writing 3 weeks after the health scare resolved. Not because I was healed or transformed or possessed of some newly acquired spiritual clarity about mortality. I started because the weeks had made it impossible to maintain the fiction that conditions would improve if I waited long enough. Writing the thing has been difficult in the specific ways I'd been afraid it would be difficult, and not in any of the ways I'd invented as reasons to wait. The material is hard to sit with, that was a real difficulty and I'd known it. The structure has been unclear and has required many drafts, that was real and I'd known it. What wasn't real was the idea that more time would resolve either of those things. More time had simply deferred them. The memoir is not finished. It may not be finished for years. But it exists now. It has pages. It has a shape that it didn't have when it lived only in the future tense, always pending the right conditions. I think about the 11 years. I try not to think of them as wasted, because they weren't. I was living during those years, accumulating the very experience the memoir is trying to understand. But I think about what those 11 years of waiting actually contained. How much of that waiting was necessary and how much was simply avoidance wearing the costume of preparation. Most of it was the second thing. I can see that clearly now. Preparation has a shape. It has specific outputs, research, notes, drafts, understanding. Waiting that produces none of those things is not preparation. It's postponement. I thought I had time. I had exactly as much time as I have, which is unknown, and finite, and not the amount I assumed. Start the thing. Not when the conditions are right. Now. The conditions will never be right. but now is always available. And now is the only place the thing gets built. Here is what I carry forward from this, and what I hope might be useful if you recognize any part of your own story in mine. The pattern I described does not operate because we are careless or unintelligent or unaware. It operates because it has a function, because it is doing something for us that we have not found another way to do. Staying in the wrong situation, staying silent when we should speak, not walking away when the door is right there, all of these behaviors persist because they are solving something, even if imperfectly. They are providing some version of comfort or protection or identity that we have not yet found a better way to provide. Understanding that function is the first move. Not judging the behavior, but asking honestly, what is this doing for me? What would I have to give up if I stopped? What am I afraid will happen if I make the change I know I need to make? Those questions do not dissolve the pattern automatically, but they make it visible in a new way. And visibility changes the relationship to the thing. When you can see what something is doing, you can start to choose whether you want it to keep doing it. The change that followed was not easier because I understood the mechanism. It was the same difficulty. But I went into it knowing what I was moving through rather than being entirely inside it without perspective. That perspective is what I want to pass on here. Not the specific story. The structure. The shape of how we stay in things longer than we should, how we look away from things we can see, how we tell ourselves the thing will change without giving it a mechanism for changing. You are not alone in this. It is not a character flaw. It is how the human nervous system manages uncertainty and fear. But you can do something different. The doing starts with the looking. Look at it. Directly. Honestly. Without the story that makes it easier to carry. And then decide what you want to do with what you see. That decision, fully conscious and fully yours, is the only kind that actually changes anything. There is also something I want to say about the specific moment of turning toward rather than away, the moment when you actually do the thing you have been not doing. Because that moment has a texture that I was not prepared for, and that I think is worth naming so you know what to expect when you reach it. It does not feel like relief. Not at first. The moment of change, of finally having the conversation, or walking away, or saying the thing, or making the decision, often feels worse before it feels better. There is a period of acute discomfort in which the old equilibrium has been disturbed but the new one has not yet settled. You have stopped managing the avoidance, which means the thing you were avoiding is now fully present, no longer softened by distance. That period is real and it is temporary. I want to say both of those things with equal emphasis. It is real, do not be surprised by it, do not mistake it for evidence that you made the wrong choice. And it is temporary, it has a duration, and that duration is almost always shorter than the years of management that preceded it. The other side of that period is different. Not perfect, change does not produce perfection. But different in the specific way of someone who has stopped spending energy on maintaining something and can now spend that energy somewhere else. The ambient cost disappears. The weight that you had normalized as simply the weight of life turns out to have been specific and removable. I have felt that release more than once. Each time it is instructive about how much I had been carrying that I didn't know I was carrying. You probably know what you're carrying. You just haven't decided to put it down yet. When you decide, it will be hard first and better after. That is almost always the order of things. And the better, when it arrives, is real. What I notice now, in the life I have after the story I told here, is a kind of attentiveness I didn't have before. Not anxiety, that's different. Anxiety is looking for the thing that might go wrong. What I have is more like a quiet, ongoing check-in. Am I here because I want to be? Am I saying what I actually think? Am I moving toward what matters or managing around something I haven't named? These questions don't produce constant disruption. Most of the time the answer is, yes, I am where I want to be, saying what I think, moving in the right direction. The check-in confirms what I thought. And that confirmation is itself valuable. It builds a different relationship with my own choices. They feel more like choices and less like things happening to me. On the occasions when the answer is different, when the check-in reveals an avoidance or a suppression or a staying too long, I try to act on the information faster than I used to. Not immediately, not impulsively, but without the elaborate deferral structure. Without the "I'll address this when the conditions are better." The conditions will not be better. They will be different. Different is workable. Better is a fiction. I am the only condition that changes. And I change through the practice of looking and then acting on what I see. That's the whole thing. The looking and the acting. Over and over. For as long as it takes. Which is your whole life. But a whole life spent actually inside it is worth more than a whole life spent at the edge of it, managing the view. I know which one I want. I think you do too.